welcome. Thank you, everyone. My name is Dan Cassette. I'm the Artistic Director of Infusion Physical Theatre, and thanks for joining us on this special evening in the Cambridge Festival. Special mention, we'd just like to acknowledge the Royal Society of Chemistry, who's made this evening possible. Thank you so much. And quite a few of them have turned out in force, members of the Society, to help us with the stewarding, and we're so grateful just to share this special time with you guys. Also, thanks to the Arts Council for the live stream, making that possible. So to our digital audiences, those who are far away, welcome, and also enjoy this evening. We're really pleased you're here. Just a note on that, the live stream is also going to remain online, so if you'd like to see the film again or show it to someone, then you will be able to access that on our YouTube channel, which is at Infusion Physical Theatre. So you can check that out afterwards. A little housekeeping, please turn off your mobile phones, and that way we won't distract anyone with lights and buzzes and things. There is professional photography and video being made, as I've mentioned, so you'll be able to access that at your leisure. And finally, from Infusion, we would like to dedicate today's shows to Adele Thompson, former dancer in residence at Queen's College, whose sudden passing took her light from us too soon. Adele shared so much joy with us, so much dance technique and encouragement over the years, and built a community of dancers that's still thriving today, and we're so grateful. You'll be missed. Now I'd like to hand you over to a very special guest who you're probably wondering who this lovely lady is, and this is Nicola Clayton, FRS, and she is going to introduce herself, but thank you so much. I'm going to go get ready. You might notice I'm also in the production.
Thank you, Dan. Well, it's a great pleasure to be here tonight. I should really be here standing next to a very tall, very beautiful older gentleman. His name is Mark Baldwin. He was the former artistic director of Rambert, OBE, and a world-renowned choreographer. But unfortunately, he's got one of these flu bugs that seems to be going around at the moment. So he's here with us in spirit, just not in person. So I'm scientist in residence at Rambert and associate artist at Rambert, as well as being professor of comparative cognition in the psychology department, where David is also based, one of the scientific advisors that you'll get to meet towards the end of the show. And Mark Baldwin and I have been collaborating on science and arts projects for over 16 years now, using various aspects of art to inspire science and various aspects of science to inspire new choreographic works. Well, you can think of it as a beautiful pas de deux of connecting science and dance together. And I think tonight's performance is a wonderful example of that. You're going to see and hear all about the 3 systems model of emotional regulation, which deals with 3 hormones: adrenaline, which is our flight and fight threat response; dopamine, which is the sort of powerhouse for motivational systems of doing things; and oxytocin, which is a hormone that's all to do with connecting and bonding and nurturing and restoring. And the piece tonight is called Soothe, emphasizing the importance of this latter process in dealing with the trials and tribulations of threats and drive systems. So enjoy and welcome.
I'll scan it when it comes up. All right. Thank you very much. We are going to invite our, almost said scientists in residence, our scientific advisors who've been a part of this project. So please welcome to the stage Professors Ljiljana Fruk and David Belin. Oh, can we get microphones for these guys? In a moment, I'm going to have these guys introduce themselves, what they do. My name is Dan Cassette, as I said, the artistic director for our Infusion Physical Theatre. And I didn't say earlier, but we're a Cambridge-based dance company, so it's nice to be here with a home crowd. So thank you very much. And we are really pleased to present Soothe and to talk about the three systems model because we found it so interesting, so empowering upon facing for ourselves some really physiological symptoms to things that were emotional pressures. And we said, what is going on? And so we started looking into this. You will be able to ask questions if you join our Slido. So the way we're doing it is very high-tech today. If you go to slido.com, you can enter in the event code, which is just there. And that will enable you to type in your questions. You can also use the QR code if you do that. And if you can't scan it off the brick wall, the ushers, stewards have some smaller scale QR codes you can access as well. So I'll give you a moment to log in. You can put your name, but you don't have to. And you can like the questions that you see that you would like upvoted so that we know the popular questions that people would like to have answered this evening. And if you're a young audience member, you are also allowed to ask questions, maybe get your grown-up to help you. And we don't need your name for safeguarding reasons, but we would love your age so we know how to answer your questions best. So without further ado, Ljiljana, would you like to say a bit?
Very nice to see you here. Thank you, Dan, as well. As you can see by the lab coat only, I am a chemist, and I worked with the group quite a lot on the biochemical basis of all of these molecules that you have seen. I do work with dopamine, not as a neurotransmitter, but dopamine has some interesting properties that we use for drug delivery and formulation. But I've been always interested in molecules of emotion as well, and the biochemical pathways that transform one molecule to another depending how we feel as well.
Nice. David.
Hi, I'm David Belin. I'm a professor of behavioral neuroscience, which means I try to understand the mechanisms in the brain that control behavior, when behavior is adaptive and everything is okay, but also when behavior goes awry. And a particular interest to me is how emotion regulation goes wrong. We've all experienced COVID-19 and the lockdowns, and we've all have become aware of the fact that many people have started using alcohol, for instance, to cope with emotions that were overwhelming, and that has come with a massive increase of alcohol use disorder. And we try to understand in my lab how individuals engaging in drug use, for instance, find themselves vulnerable to developing addiction as a failure to cope with the difficulties of life. So it speaks a lot to what Dan has been doing.
All right, let's get into it. So, just to give you a little insight as well, we were working on this project and looking at the molecules for inspirations for our movement. We were looking at the concepts behind them, so we took some prompts from the concepts themselves. The work was developed collaboratively, but then after kind of assembling the raw materials, we've had the privilege of Ljiljana and David coming in and telling us more as we go, and it's just been super revealing. So we've got a few questions to start us off. All right off the top, we're getting into it. What was the intention for turning these vital hormones and enzymes into a physical representation? Great performance, by the way. Thank you. Well, I'll start, and then I would just love for you guys, when you get your interest peaked to just start jumping in. So coming out of the COVID lockdowns, or towards the middle end, members of our team started to have really intense physical reactions, and even to the point of pain in the heart, and wondering what is going on. Paramedics, the whole 9 yards, they said, your heart is fine. Do you have any stress? We say, yeah, we have tons of stress. So that began a process for us, and we found out about CBT, which put us on to the 3 systems model. And what was so interesting for us was finding out that it's a little bit of a misnomer. We advertised the show as dance and brain chemistry, but it's actually biochemistry. What's happening, the same molecules and hormones that are up here are also firing off, and they have functions throughout your whole body. And so there's a chain reaction that carries on, and there are things that release one reaction and trigger another one. And so we started looking at the concepts, and we're like, gosh, this is all about movement. We just have to put it in a dance studio, and the show's going to write itself. So we had real interest in what is dopamine? Is it the happiness molecule? What is oxytocin? How do we get more of it? Seems that in our society at the moment, there's lots of threat, there's lots of drive. Where's the soothe? Any initial thoughts before we go any further?
Yes, if I might jump in. So one of the things that, of course, when you think about the chemistry and biochemistry and how these little molecules are kind of transforming our emotions into physical responses, it's all about motion. It's about binding of dopamine to a protein receptor, which then changes slightly the conformation and triggers the whole cascade of reactions in the cell. And this is what we sometimes discussed in the rehearsals as well. How can we show this kind of binding and very quick reactions that happen? And some of the signals that are transferred, some neurotransmitters like dopamine, they travel very fast through our neurons. 300 kilometers per hour sometimes can be the average speed of them traveling through neurons. So this was also an inspiration sometimes to have this fast movements. And transformations happen relatively quickly at this molecular level. For some molecules, as we will see later, not for all of them.
Nice.
And, well, when one wants to talk about emotions, one could write a book, one could give a talk, or one could share their emotions. And it seems to me that dancing may well be the best way to convey what an inner feeling is. I could spend 20 hours explaining to you how eating chocolate makes me feel, but none of you could tell me whether it makes me feel better or worse. We can't necessarily compare how we feel, but we can share how we feel, and it's all about movement. So perhaps one reason why a dance show can be the best way to talk about these molecules is because these molecules make us move inside and out, and dance is exactly that.
What hormones, this is a 7-year-old audience member, what hormones make you angry, and which make you tired, and why, when you are tired, may you get angry? This is a very layered question, so I think there's a lot to jump on. Any thoughts?
That's a beautiful question. So some hormones such as corticotropin releasing factor, that's a long name, CRF, and noradrenaline, the little sister to adrenaline that acts in the brain like adrenaline does in the body, contribute to make us feel angry. That's also called the rage system, which is very important for the survival of many, many animals and all mammals. What hormones make us tired? Well, one of them, everyone knows about them without necessarily knowing about them. One of them is the target of caffeine. So when we are awake, our neurons use a lot of energy to compute information. And when biological systems use energy, they produce waste. And the fuel neurons use is called ATP, And the waste is called adenosine. And the more the neurons work, the more adenosine accumulates in the brain. And adenosine acts on adenosine receptor of the type 2A, and these receptors are actually blocked by caffeine. That's the reason why caffeine, while being a stimulant, also helps us stay awake when we feel tired.
But if I just add also the question of why are we angry when we are tired? It's a very individual reaction. When I get tired, I start speaking Croatian suddenly to everybody around me. It's my mother tongue. Simply because the energy is so low. So one of the things that definitely helps in my case is getting not necessarily caffeine, but chocolate always helps. A little bit of sugar, a little bit of tryptophan, which is in chocolate, can go a long way. So everybody individually will find the ways of dealing with this. So my students will know that a little bit of chocolate will keep me in a good mood.
White, milk, or dark?
Dark.
Yes. Okay. Fantastic. There are some great questions here. I want to let's start. We'll work our way down, but let's try to power through a few of these because there's a fun one or two down there that I'm after. What was the? Oh wait, we did that one. Hang on. How do you think dance can effectively become an alternative therapy for mental health? I think there are some programs that are being rolled out even now in the NHS, and I do know also in Germany and some other countries where they are prescribing activities, going to the gym, getting involved in classes that are physical and moving. And so something which is part of the journey of this dance even is understanding that group connection and even physical connection. You mentioned eye contact this afternoon at the first performance. These things are important, and so it's a wonderful way to begin to interact. You also get to work out some of the stress molecules, some of the excess adrenaline and things that may be kind of building up in the system. So I think there are things that are coming, and I think it's a positive wave. Open to additional thoughts as well, but just there may be some referrals that may be possible. And I think that kind of stuff is also features as preventative, which is a fantastic form of antidote before the situations might get out of hand. Any thoughts?
Maybe David, you will know better, but also some repetitive motions, repetitive actions are, of course, very good for us. And in a dance, I always imagine, of course, you have lots of freedom to experiment. You can't make mistakes if you are not performing in front of the knowledgeable audience. But it's also a repetition and rhythm that is really biochemically very helpful in maintaining a balance. Ultimately, what we are not seeking is this balance. So we want to have this homeostasis in our system that keeps us going and functioning.
And so there's another way to think also about dance, which is as a physical exercise, it will trigger the release of beta endorphins, which are the hormones in the body that contribute to relaxation, and they're also the neurotransmitter in the brain that mediate pleasure, the subjective experience of pleasure. And boosting pleasure is a very good way to deal with negative thoughts and low mood. Dance also requires mastering of posture, understanding one's breathing, and that can relate to some activities such as mindfulness or meditation in movement. And that has also been shown to have profound therapeutic potentials for psychiatric conditions. So I would not be surprised that if in a year or slightly more distant future, dance will be part of the therapeutic portfolio across the board.
Nice. All right. Can you tell us more about isolation and how that affects the different systems of threat, drive, and soothe?
So we've all experienced isolation, right? Isolation comes in different flavors to different individuals. The first thing that we need to bear in mind is that the environment that suits each one of us is unique to us, because what we would consider a fulfilling environment is the extent to which a particular external system matches our expectations. So what is a good environment for me may not be the same one for everyone. But there is a core component to any good environment, and that for the species we are, who need social interactions, the ability freely to interact with our peers. So isolation is going to take the Soothe system away from us, which is profoundly dependent on interpersonal interactions. It will also facilitate the development of bodily responses such as inflammation, inhibition of our immune system, and that can even cause inflammation in our brain, which, according to one of the leading theories of the time, present time, may well contribute to the development of depression. So during isolation, we lose agency, the agency to be an actor in the world and interact with our peers. That triggers a rewiring of our prefrontal cortex, which can no longer properly control a system in the brain called serotonin, which is very important for mood regulation and cognitive flexibility. So being in isolation makes organisms less flexible, and that also results in a profound decrease of dopamine, which is important for generating motivation and learning about good things and bad things in the environment. And it also influences the stress system, sustaining high levels of stress so that we are no longer able adaptively to cope with an acute stressor, so much our system is overwhelmed.
And not to mention, of course, there is lots of interest in exchange of microbes between the humans as well, and humans and animals, and the role of these microbes that we have in our gut in controlling the brain chemistry. So we know that a large percentage of serotonin is actually produced in gut cells. And we have the most of the bacteria are basically residing in gut. So in isolation, we are not even sharing this microbiome with other humans, and therefore we are not improving or increasing the diversity of microbiome, which ultimately affects our chemistry as well. So not only the chemistry within us, but these interactions with the environment are extremely important, and we need to keep them diverse as well.
Yeah, you also mentioned in one of our weeks together that, well, maybe it was both of you actually, that something like oxytocin, once you have it, then you give it, but if you give it, then it increases within you. And so there's a positive snowball effect that comes through that as well. All right. There's a couple questions that sort of touch on this. So Sam asks, what psychological and emotional experiences do not fit into the three systems model? That's come up in another place as well. I think there's probably many, but this model is a simplification by all means. And as you're hearing the discussion already, you're hearing about serotonin and triphtamides and things I can't say. And like, there's so much going on, but it's a basis for starting. I'm sure that things like, I don't know, greed, envy, they might be things that happen outside of this, but I'd be spitballing.
So actually, when one considers the hierarchy of emotional states, there would be the primary affective states, which are supposedly experienced by any mammal. And these are rage, lust, drive or seeking, soothing. So you have these primary affective systems. And then, very likely, only humans can elaborate cognitively to experience higher order motivational states and emotional states. For instance, jealousy is an interpretation of an issue with lust. And greed is an interpretation of an activation of the seeking system. And even within the seeking system or the drive system, we actually have two systems. One that I will call the drive system, which are the primary motivational states that are necessary for the survival of the organism. I need to eat and I need to drink, and for my species to survive, I need to mate. Then, that's drive. I need that to survive. But if you give me the choice between a broccoli and a nice sizzling steak, I'm gonna go for the steak. That is incentive motivation. That is more the seeking system. So the seeking system will dictate our preferences. The drive system will dictate the needs we have. Interestingly enough, in some psychiatric conditions, such as substance use disorder, the two systems become completely intertwined, such that drug use, that is initially something I seek, I don't need, becomes an object I really can't live without, and is perceived as necessary for my survival. And that, interestingly enough, is not uniquely human. So there are primary affective states that we can elaborate on. That's our higher cognitive function that speaks when we share our emotions, but we do not need to verbalize emotions to express them, as you all know. And then these primary affective systems can become blurred in particular conditions, which are manifested as humans do in a highly complex way that has a social meaning that is not the case in other species. So it's not because we are humans that we are above the other species when it comes to primary affective states. There are these three systems, we can add two others, but the elaboration we make of it and the ability to judge our emotions, I know I shouldn't feel that way, hence I feel guilt, that's potentially properly human.
A 7-year-old audience member asks, are all human hormones known? Or might there be a new one to discover?
Do you want to go with it?
So I'm happy to slightly go sidesway. Tonight we've discussed noradrenaline and dopamine and oxytocin. So dopamine and noradrenaline are neurotransmitters. They are very small molecules. But actually, we have known about noradrenaline for a very long time. And until the 1960s, dopamine was not known as a neurotransmitter. We knew it was part of the synthesis. It was a step towards the synthesis of noradrenaline. 20 years ago, when I was at university as a student, slightly longer than that, 25 years ago, I was told that a neuron could release one small molecule, a neurotransmitter, and one peptide. And now we know that neurons can release different types of neurotransmitters. And we also know now that there are other cells in the brain called astrocytes. There were some pictures of them on the screen during the show. And these astrocytes can also release neurotransmitters that we believe were only metabolic products. So it could well be the case that there are still molecules in the brain that can act as transmitters one way or another that we are yet to discover.
And as David also said, we also are discovering new roles of these molecules as well. So they are not necessarily always involved in communication between neurons. They can program immune cells or tune immune cells how they will work, and therefore inflammation. And we are finding in our lab that dopamine is very good in making polymers as well. So we make capsules that can carry the drugs into the cells based on dopamine. So, most likely we will find some other molecules that are involved in neurotransmission as well, but we are also finding new roles for the molecules that we know already. And this is the beauty of research.
Nice. Oh no, the questions keep moving around. I have to go find it now. Where'd it go? Have you explored emulating the hormones involved in women's health and life cycle? That would be an interesting approach and support to women. This is a great question. I have a story, and then I'll let you guys take over. We premiered the work at the Edinburgh Festival Fringe, And after one of the shows that we did, someone came up to us and said, I don't know if everybody else got that brain chemistry stuff, but I did. Oxytocin is the love hormone. And she went on to describe how oxytocin is a major factor in starting contractions for delivering a baby, and also is present in the mammary glands, actually squirting the milk to the baby for breastfeeding. And so she didn't say, but I suspect she was a healthcare worker or possibly a midwife and had done her homework. So there's definitely a lot going on that even plays into this, and it's part of our biological experience, and it's key for our survival. We need all of these hormones in balance and at the right times, but they're crucial for our survival. Don't know if you guys have.
Yes, and just to add, and David will add as well, I mean, for a long time we didn't take into account the differences between genders, and particularly female-male hormonal cycle, but now we do, and also in our studies, whenever we do the studies, we do take into account, because simply there are differences that we need to study, explore, to understand better the interventions that we need to do later on when we are faced with some disorders or diseases that are primed by changes in neurotransmitters or hormones as well.
And so that's a brilliant question, because when we come to oxytocin, for instance, many of the functions oxytocin does have in females, it is another hormone called vasopressin that supports these functions in males. And some of the functions of oxytocin in male brains are exactly opposite to those it has on female brains. So this is indeed very important to consider. Here I'm talking about the biological sex of the organism, because that will dictate through genetic determinants the wiring of the brain and on which particular neurons and which parts of the brains these receptors are located to vasopressin or oxytocin, and the localization of these receptors and the type of cells that express these receptors will determine the functional consequence of the release of these neurotransmitters in the brain. So yes, these are very important questions to consider, and we've made huge progress in understanding how the female brain is wired very differently to the male brain. Everybody knows that females are far better, more intelligent, and emotionally far more acute than males. There's nothing new about that. Now we start understanding why.
Nice. We have time for just one more, so I want to, it's just possibly quantities. Do hypersensitive people have higher amounts of hormones?
That's a difficult question, because it depends what is meant by sensitivity. One cannot be hypersensitive to everything. There's always a balance. I can give you an example. Every single scientist is characterized by a high sensitivity to something you would not guess. But all scientists are characterized by high sensitivity to boredom. When what is known becomes boring, you start creating knowledge. That's what we do. And interestingly enough, boredom susceptibility comes with less sensitivity to the messages that come from the inside the body. It very much depends on what kind of sensitivity we're talking about. There's always a balance. We've been mentioned several times, balance between neurochemicals, balance between chemical reactions that are going to transform a molecule into another. Each one of us is different. Each one of us has increased sensitivity for a particular stimulus than someone else, but that comes at the expense of another type of sensitivity. So it's quite difficult to address such a question from a very generic point of view, at least as far as I'm concerned.
But one thing that always interests me as well is why are we so sensitive to negative news? You know, when we have the negative news cycle, we seem to be seeking more negative news. And of course, you know, certain media have realized this addiction that we have. And the reason is in biochemistry. So cortisol that we have, it's a stress hormone, will definitely be produced very fast, and it degrades slower than some of the other hormones. So it takes 24 hours to degrade cortisol. So it persists in our body for a longer period of time. And it's released in a higher amount when we are exposed to something negative, because we need to protect ourselves. Oxytocin, on the other hand, being a peptide, is degraded faster. And it takes a little bit longer to make it. So you need to kind of be exposed to many good things to keep the level of oxytocin high. And this, you know, of course, makes you feel like, oh, negative. We remember it much better than the positive things. And there is a reason in biochemistry as well. The ways how molecules degrade, how are they produced, how are they transformed in our body.
Fantastic. That's actually, I was going to sneak in a bonus last question, because, but you started to touch on it already, because we have an age 7 participant who's very insightful and asked, how long does a hormone live? Where does it go when it is no longer active? You've mentioned oxytocin. You've mentioned cortisol. Tell me about dopamine and adrenaline.
Can I say about adrenaline, my favorite?
Yeah.
So when adrenaline degrades, it actually degrades in the precursor, in the small molecule from which vanillin can be made. You know vanilla taste? When you buy a vanilla aroma, it will have vanillin. So I always tell to my students, you know, when you start to relax, you probably smell like vanilla. And the reason is that the degradation pathway actually involves these very pleasurable molecules as well. And maybe that's why we feel attracted to very relaxed people. They just smell differently. But as we know, every hormone will have a different pathway. Small molecules will be transformed very quickly. They are transformed with the help of proteins in our body. So the reactions will be very fast, and they will be happening on the millions scale regularly. But larger molecules like oxytocin, which is a peptide, it will take a longer period to make, and also sometimes it's very sensitive, and it will degrade very quickly. So even that kinetics of those transformations is, of course, very important for our emotional reactions. Whenever I meet somebody that annoys me a little bit or drives me angry, I'm just thinking kinetics. What is happening now in the biochemistry of this person? It feels much better immediately.
And if I may just follow up on that, some molecules are not necessarily broken down. So for instance, dopamine is recycled. 70% of the dopamine that is released at any time is recycled. So the brain has found a very clever way to save energy that is dedicated to synthesizing these little molecules. So our neurons are equipped with massive vacuum cleaners that only detect dopamine, and as soon as dopamine is released, it is sucked back up into the neuron. And it has recently been discovered that other cells in the brain, astrocytes, they look like stars, also have this vacuum cleaner. And tonight in the show, you may have seen at some point against the wall, blue dots with a lot of little green dots on it. These blue dots were the nuclei of astrocytes, and these green dots were molecules of the dopamine transporter. So we can visualize these vacuum cleaners. And for those of you who are interested, these dopamine transporters, for instance, are the target of amphetamines and cocaine and a lot of drugs that one should not take. But all these drugs that make people look exactly like the crew look like when they were on the dopamine, this is the molecule that is being targeted. So we have an embedded recycling system in the brain for these small molecules as well, and they can eventually be broken down.
Amazing. So guys, where can we follow you on social medias? Where can we find out more What's going on?
David is probably going to tell you, get off of the social media. You know, into socializing, oxytocin, releasing
The
activities.
in-person stuff is the best, but you'll know where to find them.
Yes. So you can find us on our website, Fruk Lab. We do also have a blog where we will write a little bit more about those molecules as well. And
you can find my lab through the Cambridge University website on the Department of Psychology. And we have a not very active, but still a bit active Twitter account, which I think is Belin David or something like this, on Twitter.
Nice.
And we prepared something for you, Dan, because it's a dance performance today, some kind of dopamine and serotonin-inducing package. So if the dancers would like to come here as well for the final round. So,
educate me.
Some nuts. Full of tryptophan, which will get converted into serotonin, among other things.
Wow.
Some chocolate, dark chocolate, lots of tryptophan and other molecules that will help you.
Tryptophan,
yes.
I'll be able to say it now.
Some fermented tea. Very good for waking you up, but also full of antioxidants and some amino acids that will get transformed. There is some more. And instead of flowers, we got you some plantable pencils. So these are pencils that you can, after you have finished writing, you can plant and they will grow into plants. And plants are full of really wonderful molecules that will make you feel happy as well. So I will put this here.
Thank you so much. That's wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We're so pleased you're here. Thank you. If you have a moment on the way out, there's also an audience survey, which would really help us if you could fill that out. It's got a little bit of information about you so that we can go back to our funders, like the Royal Society of Chemistry, and that just helps us to tell them how effective it's been and hopefully bring this show to more audiences like this. And also, you can tell us your thoughts specifically about the show, and we'd love to hear from you as well. But thank you again. Have a wonderful night.